What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of AKP Sports Talk. Ari, how you doing? Obviously, it's a special day for me. It's my 23rd birthday, so having a great morning. Ari, how you doing so far?
Yeah, I'm doing good. Happy Jordan year 23rd. Yeah, doing good. Obviously, we had the home run derby in the AllStar Game here this week. Now, baseball's back. As of yesterday, we got training camp rolling around more teams. Having all their players report to camp. And then I believe by Mondays when every single team will have every player being reported to camp. So yeah, exciting times with football right around the corner. Second half of the year in baseball. So yeah, a lot going on.
Oh yeah, definitely. You mentioned it. Second half of baseball, literally right on the corner, starts pretty much now. We have the second half of the regular season. You mentioned training camp. Just kind of getting closer and closer to August just means closer and closer to the beginning of the NFL season. We're just gonna get right into it. We're gonna first start just a little quick hit about the home run derby. We're gonna talk about just Julio Rodriguez. Who would have thought made it to the finals? We literally talked about it on Monday after the Derby. We were talking about how we almost had the exact bracket predicted as we talked about last Friday, except the first round matchup. Albert Pujols, who would have thought, came out of nowhere, beat Kyle Schwarber in the first round, and almost beat Juan Soto to make it to the championship round. But championship round was Juan Soto versus Julio Rodriguez. Julio dominated the first two rounds. The only person to get more than 3 home runs in both for rounds 1 and 2. Ari, what did you see from that performance from Julio on Monday?
Yeah, I think even though Julio didn't win the actual derby, he still stole the show. I believe I saw a stat. It was like entering this year's home run derby. There had been only 4 times ever where a player had hit 30 plus home runs in a single round, and he did it his first 2 rounds ever. And if you look at total home runs, he had 28 more than the next best. So even though Soto won the Derby, I think it was still a great show by Julio, and a great spotlight, especially for those on the East Coast who normally don't watch baseball on the West Coast, given how late it is on the East Coast. And then I think it's a warm up for him to have an even better show next year when he hopefully plays again in the Derby when the game's in Seattle. So yeah, I think it was a great show for him to put his name on the map, because obviously Mariners fans, we've been watching him all season, but other people haven't, and so I think it was good. It was a great spotlight for him and the Mariners.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on all points there. You mentioned that it was kind of a given spotlight to Julio. Not many people get to see him and see his talent, and us Mariner fans, we've been saying that all season that this guy is something special, and he proved it on Monday. That man, you mentioned it, only 4 players to ever hit more than 30 homers. Julio hit had two 30 home run rounds in the first 2 rounds of his first ever home run derby. And I mean, you got to say that's something special. He was just that the BP pitcher, he was just automatic, and then Julio was just automatic, hitting him to left field. So that was just something special to see right there. Even though Juan Soto did win the Derby, you mentioned Julio definitely stole the show. It was great to see the 2 pretty much youngest competitors in the home run derby compete in the final. Definitely, a tale of what's to come for the future. And maybe obviously, maybe I was literally about to get into that. I was about to say, maybe it was some foreshadowing that Juan Soto may be coming to Seattle, facing Julio Rodriguez, and just all the little hints that the Mariners have put in about maybe getting for Juan Soto. I heard that they're definitely one of a few teams definitely trying to contend, and I feel like that'd be a great idea to add for an addition, but that'll be a heavy haul for him in terms of prospects, and we probably have to take either Strasburg or Patrick Corbin's contract, which are both egregious. So that's kind of the cost we kind of have to pay. But as we get closer to the trade deadline, we'll talk more about potential movement for Juan Soto if he declines this next contract offer the Nationals give him. And I just want to quickly hit on this. This whole plane saga is kind of crazy. Apparently, there's because Juan Soto did not sign that fat contract for the Nationals. They didn't even fly him to the AllStar game. He had to fly commercial and got to LA at 1 a.m. and then had to compete for the home run derby. Ari, this saga is a little crazy, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just petty, for all he's done for them, and then to put Soto in the same boat, with all due respect to Paul Blackburn in Oakland, and them that whole thing where they were gonna have him fly commercial until the Astros stepped in and let him fly on their plane. But yeah, I think it was definitely uncalled for, and I think it probably something like that's only going to drive them further apart. So yeah, I mean, it seems like it's inevitable. Like originally, I thought maybe Soto would be traded in the off season, not the not the trade deadline, but now. And then he quote tweeted Derek Jeter, who said something like loyalty doesn't only go one way, or something along those lines. So, yeah, it seems all but inevitable at this point that he's going to be traded at the deadline in 10 days, I believe it is. It's August 2nd. So yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. It's kind of all leading up to the fact that that Juan Soto is probably going to be traded somewhere. You mentioned just how petty it is. It's actually kind of ridiculous just how, this has gone so far to where, you mentioned where Paul Blackburn's kind of in the same boat of going to the All-Star game with Juan Soto, and that's kind of ridiculous at this point. He's your star athlete, and he's your star guy, and you're not even going to send him to the All-Star game. You're going to make him go fly commercial. I feel like it's just petty ridiculousness, but that's just kind of, you mentioned, just driving the wedge further apart between Juan Soto and the Nationals, and at this point, it's kind of inedible that Juan Soto will definitely be traded from the Nationals. Just a matter of where and when. That's kind of the question. Obviously, the haul that Washington's going to be asking for is a lot, but that's just kind of how that's going to be the price for Juan Soto anyway, because of how much of a commodity he really is. I mean, we've seen him play baseball, and he's pretty much one of the best, if not the best, pretty much outfielder in baseball right now. And for that hot commodity, you got to be asking for a lot. So we'll definitely up with that. But we're just going to transition quickly into the All-Star game that happened Tuesday. We didn't get to talk about that on Wednesday, but All-Star game. So it was just basically kind of a pitcher's duel for most of the latter half of the All-Star game. At first, Clayton Kershaw, got out of that first inning pretty smoothly, and then Shane McClanahan was on the mound for the AL, gave up I think a 2-run RBI single to Mookie Betts that put the National League on top, 1-0. I believe that was that followed by what was the next RBI? Ari, do you remember?
Was that the Paul Goldschmidt homer? Yeah, I think it was. Yeah, I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah, then the Paul Goldschmidt homer. Then they made it 2-0 in the bottom half of the second inning. The NL leading 2-0, and then all of a sudden the American League had this resurgence. Giancarlo Stanton had a 2-run homer that was belted the left field off of Tony Gonsolin to make it an even 2-2. And then right after that, Byron Buxton homer to left field, high 90-mile-an-hour pitch from Gonsolin, make it 3-2, and that was your final score throughout the rest of the game. 3-2 score. AL continues their winning streak against the National League in terms of the All-Star game. We didn't get to see that much from Ty France or Julio Rodriguez, but it was great to see him play, Ari. What were your thoughts on that All-Star game on Tuesday?
Yeah, I mean, I think it just shows you how dominant pitching is, just overall in MLB. I mean, Emmanuel Clase, who closed the game out in the ninth, I think he threw 10 pitches and he struck out the side, 9 strikes. So it shows you how dominant the pitching is. I thought it was really cool how they had some of the pitchers mic'd up. They had Nestor Cortez and Trevino, when the Yankees teammates, when they were on the mound behind the plate, talking to each other about kind of strategy and just kind of what pitches to throw. You had Alek Manoah mic'd up too on the mound. You had Liam Hendricks, who had the funny segment, or not the funny instance with Julio, where he was yelling Julio's name to not throw the ball into the crowd, and Julio was throwing it. So I think a lot of stuff like that makes it more kind of engaging, for the fans, just to not make it like just another regular game where, a lot of people in general find it, long and boring and whatever you want to call it. But so I think changing up just some things like that just kind of makes it more engaging. But I mean, it's just as far as the play on the field. Yeah, I mean, the NL scored the 2 runs in the first inning, and then the AL scored their 3 runs in, I think, the fourth, maybe third or fourth, and that was the only run scored in the entire game. So, I mean, obviously, you don't know how much effort people are putting in because you don't want to get hurt, obviously, in a game like this. But I think it also just shows you just how dominant pitchers are these days, just overall in both leagues.
Yeah, definitely from what I saw, it was more of a pitcher's duel throughout that game. And you mentioned, it was a lot more relaxed, a lot more fun out there, because it's the AllStar Game. Obviously, don't want to have any stress about maybe getting injured. So, but you mentioned I like the mic'd up segments with Nestor Cortez and Jose Trevino, able to see, what they're talking through in terms of an at-bat. So that was really cool to see. And then Manoah asking, for what pitch he wants. I believe it was Smoltz. He was asking what pitch he wants to do, a slider. He's like, "Oh, you're sexy." So I was like, that's just something Alex Manoah would say, but that's just something, you don't get to hear at a regular game, but at the All-Star Game, you get to hear those kind of moments. So definitely really cool to see that. You mentioned Liam Hendricks and, mentioned, Julio, don't throw the ball in the crowd and all that stuff. That was something really fun to see. And, just kind of, that's just the brightness of the All-Star Game. You get to see all these players who, are from different ethnicities and different backgrounds all coming together just to have fun on one game. I mean, you get to see guys like Shohei Ohtani and Julio Rodriguez play baseball together. Like, you don't really get to see that, obviously, in any other game. So that's kind of the beauty of the All-Star Game. All these different people from different backgrounds and, from different teams just all coming together just to have fun in the Midsummer Classic, on a nice, beautiful day. So, yeah, definitely a fun All-Star Game, but it's going to be a lot better next year when it comes up to the Pacific Northwest. Definitely excited to go to that one next year in Seattle. Hopefully Julio will definitely compete in the All-Star Game. Obviously, a little home field advantage. I think he'll definitely be the representative for Seattle, hopefully next year after his performance this year. So, yeah, definitely hyped for next year, but definitely a great All-Star week for the MLB down in Los Angeles this past week. But now we're going to transition here from the MLB. We're going to go more toward the NFL here. This is something that we wanted to do on Wednesday, but obviously travel issues with me. Again, a little tired, but now we're going to talk some fantasy football. We're going to talk about some players that are kind of, tough to really evaluate, rank, or value just from terms of their situations throughout the offseason and now heading into training camps. Ari, I want you to go first. I want you to give me 2 players, and I want you to name why you think those players are kind of tough to rank in terms of their value or their current situations.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just start with 2 players that the reason why they're tough to rank or value is because of potential suspensions. And, that being Deshaun Watson and then Alvin Kamara, too, who is facing a potential 6-game suspension. I mean, Watson, we've heard anywhere from 6 games to season long. Based on what I'm hearing, it sounds like maybe it's more likely going to be not the whole season, but maybe 6 to 10 games. But then, then you also have the values of guys like Amari Cooper and Nick Chubb who are going to change depending on the suspension. So you have that, and you have Alvin Kamara, who had the legal issues earlier in the offseason, and his hearing was pushed back to August 1st. And so I've heard rumors that maybe the suspension doesn't happen until next year, 2023. Maybe like if it gets pushed back even more, but I don't know all those specifics and all that. So it's kind of a wait and see situation for the most part. But yeah, I mean, I'll just start off with Watson and Kamara for just the obvious unknowns of how much time they might miss this season.
Yeah, you mentioned Deshaun Watson. That's kind of a given right there. Obviously, his looming suspension. But, the thing is, it's interesting because the Texans have settled like most of those cases. I think most of all of the cases in Deshaun Watson's case in terms of his massage appointments and whatnot. Well, obviously, you guys know the full situation of that. But, yeah, it's interesting because right now, obviously, at first it was looking like, okay, Deshaun Watson may be going to jail for this. And then it turned into, okay, well, it looks like the Texans are settling all these cases to now, okay, well, what's going to be the suspension for Deshaun Watson during the season? You mentioned we've seen 6 to 16 games. I've seen, maybe not even a few games. I've seen maybe even no games, no suspension. And, that's kind of one thing that's really been looming around pretty much the whole league and pretty much the whole Cleveland Browns organization. I didn't want to mention this, but Cleveland did just sign, Josh Rosen yesterday on that, 1-year deal because, quarterback room is kind of thin right now. If Deshaun Watson is going to be suspended, I think that's kind of what the Browns are kind of thinking what's going to happen because obviously with this signing, they already have Jacoby Brissett, and then obviously with just trading Baker Mayfield away, they don't really have that much QB depth. So, definitely some more insurance bringing Josh Rosen in probably as like the third string for that Cleveland Browns organization. But yeah, it's definitely a lot more tricky for Deshaun Watson because at this point we really don't know what is going to happen. There's been so many rumors about how many games he will be suspended, if he will be suspended, and all that not. So definitely one of the more bigger questions is Deshaun Watson. We don't really know what his suspension is going to be handling right now. And then you mentioned Alvin Kamara and his suspension. His is a looming 6-game suspension as well. So you can't really evaluate, how much fantasy value he's going to bring to that New Orleans organization this year when we don't even know if his 6-game suspension is going to be, in or not. So, you mentioned those two players. Those are definitely some players I definitely agree with in terms of that are tough to rank. One guy I want to mention is Jimmy Garoppolo. I think he's someone that's kind of tough to value and rank right now because, there's just been reports that he's going to be fully healthy to come back to training camp after his injury in the NFC Championship against the Rams. And then now, obviously, there's been so many rumors about him being traded. We don't really know where he's going. We don't really know what the Niners are doing. So that kind of also affects Trey Lance's value and rank because if Jimmy Garoppolo stays, what does that mean for Trey Lance? And then, obviously, if Jimmy Garoppolo goes, Trey Lance is going to have a full season at quarterback for the San Francisco 49ers. So, does that mean is he going to step up to the rise? That's his first full season, obviously not playing, obviously coming in for a few snaps in a few games and stuff like that. So I think those two are kind of in a tough position right now because you really don't know what the Niners are going to do with their quarterback situation because obviously they want to sign Deebo Samuel to that big contract. But because Jimmy Garoppolo's contract is still on with the Niners, obviously we can't really evaluate what's going to happen with Jimmy G if they're still trying to trade him because the Niners are still trying to get rid of him right now. And right as of now, obviously there's not that many suitors who really want to get Jimmy G Garoppolo because most of the quarterbacks most of the QB rooms are pretty much filled at this point in terms of all around the league. So it definitely be a weird position for Jimmy Garoppolo to be traded. I don't really know any suitors that would fit for him right now because Jimmy Garoppolo is probably going to be in a position where he wants to be the immediate starting quarterback. And I feel like mostly around the league, we kind of have all those positions filled. So whatever the Niners do, it's definitely going to be interesting. But right now, you can't really evaluate pretty much all that 49ers QB room with Jimmy Garoppolo still pending on what the Niners are going to be doing with him.
Yeah, the other day it was reported that they gave him permission to seek a trade, but like you said, there's not really a market for him right now. So there's a chance the Niners eventually either just release him and let him go wherever he wants, or they wait for, an injury to happen and then they just trade him, to that team that has the injury. But it sounds like, at least to me, that Trey Lance is more than likely going to be the starter this year at this point. But yeah, like you say, Garoppolo doesn't have much of a market. So with all the money he's making, do you just leave him on the bench early in the season and just wait for a trade potential to come up? This is definitely a messy situation where you would, after hearing Garoppolo's press conference after they lost in the playoffs last year, you would have thought he would have been long gone by now, out of San Francisco, and now he's still there. So definitely a situation that's a little bit murky, but I still think Lance is going to be the week 1 starter more likely than not. A couple other receivers I wanted to bring up, one being Michael Thomas. He opened up training camp on the PUP list, but in training camp PUP, you can be taken off at any point. It's not like regular season where you're on the PUP list, you're forced into 6 games. But obviously the last 2 years, Michael Thomas has played 7 total games. We know what he's capable of when he is the number 1 receiver in 2019. And there's still not too much competition. Like, they have Jarvis Landry, Chris Olave, but if Michael Thomas is healthy, he's still the clear number one in New Orleans. But the question just becomes how much we can trust his health after the last 2 years. So in training camp, Michael Thomas will be probably one of the bigger players to kind of monitor in training camp to see when he's taken off the PUP list, and then how much practice he can be, how he looks, if he sees any action in preseason, all of that. And then the other player was Amon-Ra St. Brown, who was the wide receiver 3 from weeks 12 to 17 last year. But a large part of that was with TJ Hawkinson and DeAndre Swift both sidelined. They bring in DJ Shark and Jamison Williams this offseason, and probably Williams won't have an impact early in the year. But still, just getting Hawkinson, Swift on the field healthy, and then bring in DJ Shark, that, brings just a question mark into what his target share looked like, because, in the back half of last year when he was posting, the elite numbers, you had guys like Josh Reynolds and Cephas as the top receivers, playing aside him. So, I still relatively believe in Amon-Ra this year, but that question of what his target share looked like with Swift and Hawkinson healthy, and then bring in DJ Shark on the outside as well, is a fair concern compared to what we saw last year. But at the same time, he's not like he's going anywhere near the top, even 4 or 5 rounds. So, I see him go in the 6th or 7th round in a bunch of mocks that we've done. So there is that, to where, he doesn't have a ton of risk baked into where he's being drafted.
Yeah, I definitely think that Amon-Ra St. Brown is a big name to really consider, because that Detroit offense is definitely a little more crowded this year. Now with bringing back DeAndre Swift, who has had some injury issues, along with TJ Hawkinson from last year. They still have Jamal Williams in that backfield. They got Jameson Williams in the draft. They brought in DJ Chark. So now it kind of affects St. Brown's value, because, he was a wide receiver 3 on that team. And now it kind of seems, now this offense is getting a little more crowded. There's a lot more names on this offense. What does that mean for his value? You really can't evaluate it too much. And I definitely agree with you there with just how crowded it is. I feel like it's definitely tough to really evaluate, just because of just how crowded the offense is and how it will have an effect on his value from last season. Because obviously throughout the latter part of the season, we saw Jared Goff and St. Brown have somewhat of a connection throughout the weeks of the regular season, heading into the offseason. So that was kind of a reason people value St. Brown so high. But you saw the Lions take Jameson Williams, and they're like, okay, well, that offense is going to still be crowded, because they still have young star DeAndre Swift, young star TJ Hawkinson, and now young star Amon-Ra St. Brown, and now they brought in young star Jameson Williams, and they still have DJ Chark. They brought in DJ Chark, who is a solid wide receiver out of Jacksonville. So, there's definitely a lot of questions for this Detroit offense, and I definitely agree with you that St. Brown is kind of the one that's going to be affected throughout this whole process. And then you mentioned Michael Thomas, and obviously that's one of the bigger wide receiver questions for me. You mentioned how his inability to just be on the field throughout the past couple seasons have pretty much plagued him in his value as someone who in fantasy football. And a lot of people have just kind of seen that as, okay, well, obviously ever since Drew Brees left, it seems like Michael Thomas fell off the face of the map, because the Saints really haven't had a consistent wide receiver all season last year. And now they brought in Jarvis Landry, and now they also drafted Chris Olave. And, now Michael Thomas is kind of being brought down to the wide receiver, potentially 3 or 2, depending on what happens with him. Obviously, he's starting on the PUP list, but, that's something early. But for now, it's definitely just definitely tricky to really evaluate his status, because 1, he's on the PUP list. 2, he's just been so injured and beat to hell in terms of injuries throughout the past few seasons. And 3, with bringing in Olave and Jarvis Landry, you can't really evaluate his status that well. So I definitely agree with you on those 2. I definitely see them as definitely tough to rank. One guy I want to talk about who's kind of rookie, but I definitely think he's tough to rank. Staying in the division, I'm going to go with Green Bay. I'm going to go with Christian Watson. I think he's someone that's kind of tough to rank or evaluate right now as well, because right now the Packers wide receiver room is kind of bare after Devontae Adams got traded away to the Las Vegas Raiders in a sign-and trade. So now now you're kind of have left for Aaron Rodgers, who's a great quarterback who's one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. You're left with wide receivers like Allen Lazard and Sammy Watkins, and they drafted Christian Watson in the second round. I think they still have who's him out of Clemson? What's his name?
Amari Rodgers.
Yeah, Amari Rodgers, the other Rodgers. So it's still very bare, and Aaron Rodgers' track record with not really throwing the ball to rookie wide receivers. So pretty much, I would say most of that Green Bay wide receiver core room is kind of a tough to rank or value because. I mean, it's kind of assumed that Allen Lazard is going to be the wide receiver one for that Green Bay organization. But, other than him, who else is really going to be there other than Sammy Watkins, who's obviously more of a deep threat and a week one threat out of week one. We don't really get to see much of just Sammy Watkins. But for week one, Sammy Watkins is always a wide receiver one. And then you have Amari Rodgers, who he's seen flashes, but, because Devontae Adams is that guy, you don't really get to see much of Amari Rodgers, who's kind of a second string receiver who's going to have to be elevated up. And then you have Christian Watson, who obviously is the rookie and he has talent, but he has to develop a connection with Aaron Rodgers. We don't know how well that's going to be developed. If it is going to be developed this season, we'll have to wait and see. But I feel like most of that Green Bay wide receiver room is going to be a bigger question this year, just because of the of who Aaron Rodgers is going to see as the wide receiver one and who's going to be throwing the ball to. But it's believed to be Allen Lazard, but at the end of the day, you really don't know just because since Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams had that big connection and just bam like that in the offseason, it's just gone. You have to work so hard to find someone who can just route run the way Devontae Adams does. So definitely going to be tricky for the Green Bay wide receiver organization this year.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about it a number of times before of just how Rodgers doesn't have a history of heavily targeting, rookie receivers or even second-year receivers. It takes time to, garner his trust and, in that rapport. And we've seen that with guys like Allen Lazard and Aaron Jones in years past. So we know that those two have the rapport at Rodgers. We don't know about Christian Watson, but then again, every trend is going to be broken at some point. And if there's a situation where a rookie is going to have an immediate connection with Aaron Rodgers, it would be this year, just given how wide open the wide receiver room is, like you mentioned. So definitely something to monitor. And yeah, I agree. It makes Christian Watson tough to rank in that we don't know if he's going to be like the other rookie receivers who don't have a big role immediately, or if he'll, break that trend and be the first rookie receiver to have a big first year, with Aaron Rodgers. And then just the last player I'd written down was Cam Akers, and just simply based on the fact that we've never seen a running back come back to full form off a torn Achilles. I put out a post on Instagram like a week or so ago with the chart that I credited to someone I found on Twitter of just the history of running backs have torn their Achilles and what happened to them next. And, the thing Akers has going for him is he's younger than all of them that have torn the Achilles in the past. And he's in a better situation to see, the workload. I think what Akers has going for him is that he was able to return, late last season into the playoffs. And although he did not look good, he was inefficient, and all of that. Just the fact that he's able to return and not have to do all the rehabbing this offseason, is a positive for him just to be able to focus on his game this offseason heading into this year. So, I was huge in Akers last year, heading into last year before he tore his Achilles, and I still like him a lot and like the situation. It's hard not to like the Rams offense, obviously, but you can't help but think of the history of running backs that have torn their Achilles and how none of them have returned to full form. I think the closest maybe would be Deontay Foreman, who's, a backup now. But other than that, we haven't seen anyone return even close to full form. But Akers has something that's going for him that those other guys didn't in terms of youth and situation. So, and like I said before, trends are going to be broken at some point, especially with, medicine evolving and all of that. And we're seeing even like from players recovering from torn ACLs quicker and all that. So maybe I'm rooting for Akers. I hope he can, break that trend of torn Achilles and running backs, but it does make you have at least some hesitation on him just given that history.
Yeah, that's a great transition to my last guy I was going to mention. One guy, obviously, you're not as high as him this year, but I'm still kind of high on him. But, there is that concern. I want to talk about is J.K. Dobbins. Obviously, right now, there's been just so many rumors about him missing week 1 because of, the Baltimore Ravens trying to preserve him and not rush him back from that torn ACL, and also potentially meniscus and just more damage to his knee in the preseason of last year for J.K. Dobbins. But definitely, I agree with you at similar points. I wish him that. Obviously, I would love for him to break that trend of hesitating of coming back from torn ACLs. Obviously, because he's a very talented back. Very power back. We've seen his talent at Ohio State, and we've seen what he can do in his first year. But we haven't seen that much since. And obviously, there's a lot of hesitation to really value and rank him just because of him coming off such a horrible injury that sideline him for the whole 2021 season, and now coming into 2022, there's still a big question on whether or not he's still going to be fully healthy. And the Ravens still pushing him out, even though he's clearing all the setbacks. That's one thing, he's clearing all the setbacks. So it's not like the doctors are telling him to push back. The Ravens are telling him to push back. So there's still that, like, who do you believe? Is he more healthy, or are the Ravens just trying to protect him more because there's something that they see that we don't see? So obviously, there's still so many questions with J.K. Dobbins. I still think he's going to be a good running back, but obviously just, the questions of his health, whether or not he's really fully healthy or whether or not because obviously after we talked about it on Monday with the reports about him saying that, going at Ian Rappaport saying that he's fully healthy or he's healthier than he thinks, something like that. We talked about it on Monday with this tweet, but it really puts into question, like, is J.K. Dobbins actually fully healthy? We really don't know. But definitely running back to really, it's really going to be tough to really value because you really don't know how he really is and what the Ravens are trying to do with him coming back this coming season. And then obviously with the whole Lamar Jackson situation kind of not really affects Dobbins as much, but, kind of has an impact. Well, if Lamar Jackson is not going to get his contract and going to sit out, then obviously why would you put J.K. Dobbins in that scenario where he's going to be stacking the box a lot and then obviously risking injury more? So definitely a little bit tougher to rank for J.K. Dobbins just because of him coming back from that gruesome injury last preseason. You don't really know how healthy he is. And even though doctors have said that he's clearing setbacks, the Ravens still want to keep him on a tight leash because of risk for this coming season. So I would definitely say J.K. Dobbins is someone that has a huge risk this coming season.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, any running back coming off a major injury, it's going to be tough to rank them next year, not knowing, how healthy they are, how the team themselves are going to approach the injury, and all of that in terms of not wanting to rush players back, but at the same time, not wanting to hold them back if they are fully healthy. So definitely makes players, tough to value in that sense. Yeah, that was all the players I had. Was there anyone else you were going to go over?
No, pretty much that's kind of all I had. Just some players to watch out for. There's definitely more, but in terms of the ones that kind of immediately stand out to me, I would definitely say those players in terms of who we just talked about and kind of the QB, wide receiver, running back room. Those are kind of the top players I definitely say are kind of the more concerning ones to really evaluate, and also tough to rank just because of their offseason situations and kind of injuries plaguing them heading into this season. Trade value and, potentially going to new teams still heading into training camp. I definitely agree with all the ones you said. But yeah, I definitely say those are the top ones. There's definitely some more, but in terms of the top players to have a little more concern about heading into this coming season, I definitely say those are the ones that are definitely the bigger names to watch out for.
Without a doubt. I think that'll do it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's going to do it for this episode. We want to keep it short. Obviously, I have a lot of celebrating to do, but don't worry. We'll be back on Monday. We'll have a longer episode. We're going to be doing another mailbag, so watch out for that. We're going to be doing a fantasy football draft on Monday, obviously, because we couldn't do one today. We're going to be moving that to Monday. So Monday, peep for that fantasy football draft as well. So we'll be asking you guys to join as well over the weekend. So a little bit of a mailbag, some fantasy football, some draft, and then obviously anything that happens over the weekend in terms of trades, MLB, NBA, NFL related. We'll keep you updated with all that. Obviously, we're still talking about this whole KD Kyrie situation. Nobody knows what's happening now. Those trade talks have kind of died, which kind of seems like, the KD and Kyrie may be staying in Brooklyn for one more year. So we'll see how that goes. But this has been an episode of AKP Sports Talk. Thank you guys so much for joining. I'm going to go celebrate my 23rd birthday. That's Ari. I'm Korea. We will see you guys on Monday. Peace out.